On October 23, 2009, a 15-year-old girl led police officers deep into a forest near St. Martin's, Missouri. With swift movements, she showed them exactly what they were looking for: a well, one that she had dug herself. This confirmed for the police that what she had written in her diary was more than just the product of a teenage imagination. What they found left them utterly shocked. They struggled to comprehend the sheer malice that had driven this young girl to such an act. It was hard to believe that someone so young could be consumed by such dark impulses. Alyssa Bustamante was born on January 28, 1994, in Cole, Missouri. Her arrival was far from planned. Her parents, Caesar Bustamante and Michelle Brock, were teenagers struggling with addiction issues and were unprepared for the responsibilities of parenthood, as they could barely manage their own lives. When Alyssa was still very young, her mother faced arrests on two separate occasions, once for drug possession and another time for driving under the influence. Though they had little interest in raising a child, the couple went on to have 3 more children, twins and a little girl named Emma. Over time, Michelle's legal troubles continued, but it wasn't just the law that kept her away from her children. Eventually, she decided that she no longer wanted to be a mother and left, never to see Alyssa or her other children again. Caesar, now solely responsible for the children, also had a troubled path. In 2002, when Alyssa was 7, he was convicted of assault and sentenced to 10 years in prison. With both parents out of the picture, Alyssa and her siblings were placed under the custody of their maternal grandparents, Gary and Karen Brock. The children moved to St. Martin's, Missouri, where their lives took a drastic turn. Karen, a devoted Mormon, aimed to guide her grandchildren along a disciplined and structured path. She established strict rules for the household, including mandatory church attendance every Sunday. This approach worked relatively well for Emma and the twins, but Alyssa proved to be more resistant. As Alyssa entered her teenage years, her behavior worsened. By 13, she had become withdrawn, preferring to keep to herself and avoid others. Behind her tough exterior, however, Alyssa was deeply hurt, leading her to begin self-harming with razor blades on her arms. On September 3, 2007, her grandparents found her in the bathroom, bleeding. She had carved the word "hate" into her abdomen and taken an overdose of Tylenol. Karen and Gary rushed her to the nearest hospital. Once her physical condition was stabilized, they sought help from a psychiatrist. Alyssa was diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder, and she was prescribed Prozac, but her mental health showed little improvement. With access to social media, Alyssa began to embrace and broadcast her rebellious personality. She shared posts with dark quotes, posed with deep red lipstick mimicking blood, and styled her eyes with exaggerated eyeliner, often showing her teeth in an attempt to intimidate followers. Her interest in dark themes wasn't just an act. She wanted the world to know what she was capable of, and she often involved her younger siblings in her expressions of rebellion. She created a YouTube account and her bio read, "I like cutting myself and killing people." Not long after, she uploaded a video titled "Electrocuted by Electric Fence" with a chilling description. Here's where it gets good. This is when my brothers get hurt. The video showed Alyssa coaxing her 9-year-old twin brothers into holding onto an electric fence meant for livestock. As the boys writhed in pain, Alyssa could be heard laughing in the background. Outside her home, Alyssa's behavior was no less troubling. She had conflicts with classmates and teachers, and she continued to harm herself, sometimes with cigarettes and other times by carving scars into her skin, a count that reportedly reached over 300. By age 15, her disturbing personality had reached its peak. During a party, she told a friend that she was curious about what it would feel like to take a life. Her friend dismissed it, assuming it was just an attention-seeking comment. Just days after her last psychiatrist visit, Alyssa's medication dosage was increased, but it wasn't enough to keep her inner turmoil at bay. On her Twitter account, Alyssa shared haunting thoughts about addiction and nightmares, once posting, "All I want in life is a reason for all this pain." She was reaching out for help, and perhaps if she had received it, the tragedy that unfolded might have been prevented. On Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, around 5 p.m., Emma, Alyssa's 6-year-old sister, knocked on the door of her friend Elizabeth Olten's house, inviting her over to play. Elizabeth, who was 9 years old, hesitated. Her mother, Patricia "Patty" Price, was preparing dinner, and her brothers, Anthony and Stephen Olten, were practicing songs for a school event. Despite the timing, Emma's eagerness convinced Elizabeth to ask her mom if she could go out for a little while. Patty agreed, under two conditions. Elizabeth had to return before dark and take her cell phone with her. Happy with the plan, Elizabeth joined Emma, and they walked the short distance to her house, just 4 blocks away. As the evening progressed and daylight faded, Patricia became worried when Elizabeth didn't come back on time. She called her daughter's phone but got no answer, which alarmed her further. She then went to Emma's house to speak with her grandparents. Karen told Patricia that she hadn't seen Elizabeth all day. Growing increasingly distressed, Patricia continued calling her daughter's phone, but each time it went to voicemail. With fear mounting, Patricia decided to report Elizabeth missing at the police station, and the search began immediately. Officers combed the neighborhood, but there was no sign of Elizabeth. By 11 p.m., news of the missing girl had spread, and many volunteers joined the search. Officers at the station tried tracing Elizabeth's cell phone signal, discovering that it was still nearby, somewhere in the wooded area between her home and Emma's house. This discovery puzzled Patricia, as Elizabeth was terrified of the woods and would never have ventured there on her own, especially in the dark. The FBI joined the search effort, deploying specialized dogs and even divers to search the nearest river, but they found no trace of Elizabeth. Then, some volunteers stumbled upon what appeared to be a freshly dug hole among the trees. It was large enough to fit a person, yet when police arrived to inspect it, the hole was empty, leaving them with more questions than answers. Returning to square one, the police decided to interview Emma, the last person known to have seen Elizabeth. Emma grew nervous but eventually admitted that, while playing in the woods, Elizabeth had gotten tangled in some thorn bushes. Emma ran home to ask Alyssa for help and then hadn't seen her friend again after that. With this new information, investigators turned their attention to Alyssa. They discovered that she had skipped school the day before Elizabeth's disappearance, an unusual absence given her spotless attendance record. When questioned at the station, Alyssa appeared calm and composed. Instead of asking her directly about Elizabeth, officers inquired about the strange hole found in the woods. Alyssa claimed she had dug it herself, explaining it was meant to bury dead animals. This response only deepened the investigators' concerns. That same day, police obtained a warrant to search Alyssa's room, where they uncovered disturbing details. Her walls were covered in sketches and phrases, some seemingly drawn in what looked like blood. Among the writings was a chilling statement. "I cut to make physical what I feel inside. I cut to see blood because I like it." The room also contained letters from her father in prison, but nothing immediately connected her to a crime until they noticed something else. A drawing with Emma, written in red, stood out. This made detectives wonder if Alyssa might harbor violent intentions toward her sister and had chosen Elizabeth as an easier target instead. The final piece fell into place when they found her diary. Inside, Alyssa had written disturbing confessions, including a desire to burn down a house with all its occupants inside. On the last page, a date was scribbled, October 21st, 2009, the exact day Elizabeth vanished. Beneath the date, two barely legible words seemed to say "throat" and "cut." Forensic experts worked to recover the full text, while detectives called Alyssa back to the station for further questioning, sensing she was hiding something. This time, Alyssa appeared even more at ease. Investigators didn't hold back, mentioning what they had read in her diary. Cornered, Alyssa finally spoke, but what she revealed left them in shock. Alyssa claimed that Elizabeth had died, but according to her, it was an accident. She had simply fallen in the woods. The officers didn't buy Alyssa's story. Locking eyes with her, they challenged her by saying, "If we find the little girl's body, her throat will be cut." In that instant, Alyssa's expression changed completely. They knew they had caught her. Meanwhile, forensic experts were analyzing the partially erased entries in Alyssa's diary. They recovered a chilling passage that read, "I just killed someone. I strangled and cut their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how I feel right now. It's amazing. Right after I did it, I felt like I can't do this," which was actually pretty enjoyable. "Now I'm kind of nervous and shaky. I have to go to church now." Investigators noted that Alyssa spoke of her victims in the plural, which raised questions. While no other disappearances had been reported, the fact remained that Alyssa had dug not one, but two holes in the forest. This, combined with her sister Emma's name written ominously on her wall and the YouTube video where she hurt her younger siblings, led detectives to suspect that Alyssa might have originally planned to harm her siblings, but ultimately targeted a less obvious victim. An alternate theory suggested that Alyssa might have intended to kill again if her crime went undetected. With mounting evidence against her, Alyssa confessed to the crime, though she refused to explain why she had used plural references or dug two graves. On October 23rd, Alyssa led the officers to the exact location of Elizabeth's grave, not the empty hole volunteers had found, but the one that held all the answers. Deep in the woods, officers discovered Elizabeth's lifeless body. Alyssa had concealed her so well that none of the searchers had noticed the grave. She was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder, meaning the crime was premeditated. She was taken to the Cole County Jail where she awaited trial. A forensic examination confirmed that Elizabeth had been strangled, her throat and wrists cut, and stabbed. With these findings, authorities reconstructed the harrowing events. On Friday, October 16, 2009, Alyssa, who had no school that day, used her free time to put a sinister plan into action, digging a grave in the woods. 5 days later, when Emma invited Elizabeth over, Alyssa decided it was time to execute her plan. After playing in the yard, Alyssa called Emma and Elizabeth into the woods, under the pretense of showing them something. Once there, Alyssa convinced her sister to leave her alone with Elizabeth. She and Elizabeth walked deeper into the woods until they reached the two holes Alyssa had dug days earlier. As Elizabeth walked ahead, unaware of the danger, Alyssa struck her brutally on the head. Though stunned, Elizabeth remained conscious. Alyssa then pinned her down, strangling her until she passed out. To make sure her victim would not survive, she pulled a knife from her back pocket and stabbed Elizabeth 8 times in the chest, later cutting her wrists and throat. She then dragged Elizabeth's body into one of the graves, covering it with rocks and branches. 45 minutes later, Alyssa returned home, acting as if nothing had happened. As the case gained media attention, the police withheld details, including Alyssa's name and age, to keep the case untainted for trial. Additionally, there was serious consideration of trying Alyssa as an adult due to the crime's severity. Missouri, one of the 22 states with a dual jurisdiction system for minors, allows suspects to be detained until age 21, after which a court reassesses whether they have been rehabilitated or must complete their sentence. Prosecutors were determined that Alyssa, seen as a threat to society, should face full accountability. Elizabeth's family held a princess-themed funeral on October 28, 2009. The casket arrived at the cemetery in a horse-drawn carriage, greeted by friends and family dressed in pink, Elizabeth's favorite color. Those who knew her described her as a sweet, kind child who loved cats and was a bit shy yet friendly. On November 17, 2009, a judge ruled that Alyssa would be tried as an adult, and her photo was released by news outlets. Her defense attorney expressed that this decision placed Alyssa in grave danger, as she now faced the maximum penalty, which he considered excessive given her age. Additionally, he worried that Alyssa might not survive her time in the Cole County Jail. At her next court appearance on December 8, 2009, reporters gathered outside, eager for a photograph of the young defendant. But to everyone's surprise, despite her confession and the evidence against her, Alyssa pleaded not guilty. While awaiting her next hearing, Alyssa attempted self-harm by scratching herself with her nails and showed severe anxiety and depression. Concerned for her well-being, prison doctors placed her under close watch to prevent any further attempts at self-harm. Witnessing her mental state, her attorney filed a motion for a psychiatric evaluation and requested that she be transferred to a mental health facility. The judge agreed, and Alyssa was moved from jail to the Children's Psychiatric Hospital, then later to Fulton State Hospital for further assessment. Due to the accused's mental health issues, the trial was postponed until May 16, 2011. However, Alyssa's attorney filed a motion to move the date forward, arguing that she was facing severe public judgment. According to her lawyer, Alyssa had already been condemned by the public, and speeding up the process was essential for her mental health. The trial was set for January 30, 2012, but before that date, Alyssa expressed a desire to confess. On January 10th of that year, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. This choice was partly strategic, as a second-degree murder conviction could mean life with the possibility of parole, or a sentence ranging from 10 to 30 years. She hoped to avoid a death sentence. Some speculated that this was part of a legal strategy, but her new lawyer insisted she simply wanted to take responsibility for her actions. That same day, the Cole County Circuit Judge asked Alyssa to recount, in her own words, what happened on October 21, 2009. Without emotion, Alyssa admitted to strangling and stabbing Elizabeth. When prosecutors asked if she had also used a knife to cut Elizabeth's throat, Alyssa confirmed she had. Her grandmother, overcome with grief, left the courtroom, heartbroken by her granddaughter's confession. Alyssa's lawyers then brought up her mental state at the time of the crime, mentioning that she had attempted suicide 2 years prior and had been prescribed a higher dose of antidepressants just 2 weeks before the murder. They highlighted her traumatic family history, noting her mother's abandonment and her father's incarceration. Psychologists who examined her testified that she was severely emotionally disturbed, suffering from major depression and symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Alyssa's legal team hoped these details might reduce her sentence or lead to psychiatric treatment rather than prison, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The prosecutor demanded a life sentence plus an additional 71 years for the life Elizabeth lost, citing Alyssa's premeditation and the 2 graves she had dug as proof. Ultimately, Alyssa was convicted of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. On February 8, 2012, Alyssa returned to court and, for the first time, addressed Elizabeth's family directly. "I know words will never be enough. They can't describe how terrible I feel about all this. If I could trade my life to bring hers back, I would. I'm so sorry." However, her words did little to sway Elizabeth's family. Patricia, Elizabeth's mother, called Alyssa a diabolical monster, while Elizabeth's grandmother shouted from her wheelchair, "Alyssa should be released from jail the same day Elizabeth comes out of her grave." That day, Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder with the possibility of parole after 35 years and 5 months, meaning she could apply for release when she turns 50. In 2014, Alyssa attempted to appeal her sentence, pointing out that the U.S. Supreme Court had recently ruled against mandatory life sentences without parole for minors. She claimed she would not have pleaded guilty had she known this. However, in a later hearing, she admitted she was aware of her other options when she took the plea. The Missouri State Court of Appeals denied her request in March 2014, but her legal battles weren't over. In October 2015, Patricia filed a lawsuit against Alyssa for the wrongful death of her daughter, seeking more than $5 million in damages. The trial was set for August 7, 2017, but in March of that year, Alyssa signed a settlement agreement. On June 25, Patricia accepted the settlement and dismissed the charges, adding a condition that Alyssa must notify her whenever she receives money for publicizing details about Elizabeth's case. In the years following her conviction, Alyssa gained an unsettling cult following. She received letters almost daily from fans who saw her as a rebellious icon, some even claiming that violence was a solution to their own struggles. On social media, many of these troubled young fans called for her release, declaring their admiration and support, seemingly ignoring the pain endured by Elizabeth's family. Currently, Alyssa remains in prison. She still hopes to secure parole before turning 50, arguing that she should not have been tried as an adult and that her personal history should have been considered more heavily. Despite this, she shows little remorse for her actions, and prison staff consider her a high-risk inmate who refuses psychiatric treatment, insisting she is a normal person. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.